Ladies and Germans, how are you all doing? This is Con Ulrich, and today I want to give you guys a little bit of a look at one of the new divisions coming out for Steel Division Normandy 44, the 1st Special Service Brigade. Now, the 1st Special Service Brigade is a commando brigade, so we're looking at guys that are kind of very light early on, don't have a whole lot of kind of middle power, but then if they can hold the line, do bring in some very, very good allies in the late game. And that's very much reflected in the style of income for the 1st SSB. You can see here, Phase A, 100 requisition points. B, we see 80, and C, 160. Some very strong opportunities do exist with this division already. Of course, this requires you to use them efficiently. Now, as a commando brigade, in fact, you will notice that you don't have maybe the same kind of activation as other divisions might allow you to have. You're having only 34 cards, and even then, not that many tank slots either. But before I really kind of talk about what's really behind it, maybe we should take a quick look at what other options do exist for each area. Recon, very light in terms of the 1st SSB. You do get the opportunity to call in some very high vet Humbers in Phase A, as well as Phase B, but this does definitely put a strain, I would say, on early kind of requisition points for you. Infantry, well, this is where the meat really kind of starts to show for the 1st SSB. And first things first, you might want to notice that they have not that many let's say, airborne kind of units. And what does that really say? Well, that basically says that you guys don't have to really worry too much about being surrounded or being pressured into a surrender. These guys don't care if they're surrounded. That's the kind of nice thing about the SSB. That being said, you don't necessarily have a ton of early infantry. As Phase A, if you want to take every Phase A card, which is 4, 8, 12, 15, 17, which does give you a lot of early firepower, but after that, well, not a whole lot left open to you. Phase B does kind of turn around and give you some anti-tank opportunities, and Phase C gives you guys that have zero veterancy whatsoever, and indeed are either made to hold the line in these Bren groups, or to kind of push back any strong points you might be seeing from your opponent in these Assault Pioneers. Now, a couple of callouts here, not necessarily decisions that I've made for my own, but things to definitely look at for yourselves. There is a unique commando squad here that mounts 5 Garands as well as elite Enfield sniper rifles, so that gives you a chance to suppress early enemy infantry at range, while not sacrificing much in up-close firepower, nor in having any kind of small squad size. I mean, having 6 guys is not a bad rap at all. The commando support, as well, as another good call out here. These guys have themselves a way better machine gun to be used on hand, as opposed to a lot of the other British squads. In this particular case, we're not looking at the piddly little Bren. No, sir, we have ourselves a Vickers K. So 8HE, as well as 2,000 rounds, you are now more than able to kind of stand up to those LMGs that are in so many of those Panzerdivision squads, as well as maybe some of the Fallschirmjägers as well from like the 91st Luftlande. Now, as intimated before, tanks are not necessarily a strong point for the SSB. I mean, being a primarily infantry organization, in Phase A, all they can depend on is 2 cards of 2 Sherman DD tanks apiece. Now, these guys will more than likely be in every SSB division, just because of the knowledge that without these guys, early vehicles will completely crush the plucky little commandos. Moving into Phase B and C, you have an option to bring in either a lot of Shermans, or to kind of wait until Phase C and bring in some Command Churchills. Now, the gut instinct might be to take 1 from each phase, and that's definitely a possibility. For me, I decided to go for 2 cards worth of Shermans here, figuring that I'm not sacrificing overly much by giving up that extra 4 armor. I mean, it's really not that much. Indeed, I give up a machine gun as well, and I think I'd rather have the extra machine gun as opposed to just having that extra 4 armor later on. So here, very much a stylistic choice, but it can go either way depending on how you decide to look at your vehicle support. Now, speaking of support, well, the SSB does have access now to ducks. Now, these guys do bring in a fair amount of munitions, and they're fairly quick on the road. But at the same time, you don't get any opportunity to do it in Phase B. So anybody making a deck for the Commando Brigade here will pretty much have to have at least one of these cards in their deck for Phase A if they're using any sort of artillery at all, or they want to make sure that anything whatsoever has munitions for the first 20 minutes of the game. Another good opportunity here is to see either a couple of cards of slightly vetted up Centaurs, or take a little bit more of a veterancy out of this Vet 2 Centaur. In either case, giving you some nice fire support, again, for that first 20 minutes. Phase B, nothing too surprising here, just a single Dingo cards. I'm bringing in 4s in either case, but just a single Bren gun, so you can get some quick, light fire support, but at the same time, you are probably better off not bothering whatsoever. Phase C is where things get a little bit more fun. First of all, you can bring in more munitions, which is definitely going to be worthwhile if you build your deck as I have, and we'll get to the artillery, we'll talk about it then. But you also get cards of 3 AVREs. Now, these guys are stupidly expensive. They're going to take up pretty much all your requisition for 1 minute. But those dustbins are devastatingly good. And that's something you've often seen, I would say, with the 3rd Scotch, with the AVREs that you can get out of that. Similarly, if you want to spend even a little bit more, you get the Crocodile. So the Crocodile with his flamethrower, as well as those best machine guns and that 75mm cannon. Good all-around tank and fairly heavily armored. So screw that Command Churchill. Yes, he may have a little bit more talent, but this Crocodile is literally an all-around vehicle and can fill that role very, very well. In terms of anti-tank, well, here's where things are kind of rough for the Commando Brigade. Well, rough, but with a silver lining to that dark cloud. Bad news first. You have 2 cards worth of AT until Phase C, and those are both these Commando Tank Busters. A little bit more of a bad idea. Well, a bad sign. All you have are Piats. On the plus side, you have 2 of them. And that 200-meter range means that, God willing, even if you miss with one, the other one should hit. So there's 6 volleys you can be throwing on off before you run out of ammunition. What's more, your tank busters really are rather good close up. Within 100 meters of range, they have 9 HE. Those Sten guns are rather good. So pretty fantastic there. Now, if you can last until Phase C, you can bring in either 6-pounders, which I admit I've done that to kind of make sure I have a lighter anti-tank that's not going to cost me an arm and a leg, or 17-pounders, as well as at least 1 card of Wolverines to go rushing around trying to pick off vehicles from a good distance. Now, shifting over to anti-air. Anti-air is unsurprising, and you'll see here you have 6 decisions, and many people are probably going to take 1 of each. So you have Bofors in great supply, especially if you make it to Phase C, but you have Bofors pretty much as your primary anti-air position. But you can also call in the Staghound AA guns. Kind of give you some close-in firepower if you need to in terms of infantry, but at the same time not sacrificing too much when fighting off earlier air power. Now, the Commando Brigade has itself a much more bizarre artillery game. And it's not in the Phase A per se. In Phase A, you either get 2-inch or 3-inch mortars, one costing a tiny bit more but giving you another 500 meters of range. And this is just a stylistic choice. It's really up to you which way you want to go with that. It's really more in Phase B that, first of all, you get this weird little vehicle. You get the Morris LRC, which gives you just 1 single Bren gun, but more importantly than that, it gives you a 960-round off-map artillery barrage, firing 127mm HE rockets. Now, some will denigrate this as 200 tickets worth of confetti. And if you look at a couple of games every now and again that have happened already, this is certainly a fair assessment. However, if you want to take a look at the map here, and the size of the reticle that gets brought on down when you want to engage with this particular artillery barrage, you can see, if you want to hold the map down for a little bit of time here and just kind of discourage, maybe not completely prevent, but discourage your opponent from bringing troops on through a particular area for about 5 minutes, this will be a selection for pretty much anybody out there. And if that's not really your decision, no, you can always fall back on things like the 25-pounder for late game fire support, 2,500 meters of range, and coming at 4 to a card, pretty darn nifty. And you can also call in Churchill OPs. While this cannon is just for show, having the field battery of 140mm is pretty darn good, and that 15 HE isn't bad either. Just give you an idea right there. So just that's the LCT just firing all those rockets on off. pretty fantastic. So 35 rounds a minute for so long. It takes forever and a day to come on out. Last but not least, air power. Now, there's a couple ways to play the Commando Brigade. One is to use basically all your air power for ground attack planes, and that's kind of what I've tended to do. But that also kind of does leave out this new nifty kind of vetted up recon plane that can finally defend itself. Yes, the Seafire L3 is a very plucky, very agile, very observant little scout plane, mounting twin autocannons, 20mm autocannons, as well as twin machine guns. An admittedly lightly armed observation plane that can strafe ground targets is probably going to be very high valued for a lot of people in the early game. Now, if you want to wait until later on in the game, you can pick them up at 2 to a pack, or it's the high vetted up version, or even later, still picking up very good veterancy, and you're gaining a little bit more firepower at the end, both in terms of autocannons as well as these 4 machine guns as opposed to just 2. Other than that, you do have Hellcats that drop bombs of all kinds and shapes, Hellcats that do rockets, Hellcats that drop other bombs, and that's really all she wrote from the Commando Brigade's air power. Now, the inclination might be to say here that the infantry is going to win you the game all the time with the Commando Brigade, but at the same time, having such a dearth of early AT can also get you into quite a bit of trouble as the first SSB. Now, if you're going to go and want to play against divisions that have a lot more vehicular firepower, whether it's like the Panzer Lehr, or even the 21st Panzer, or the new 9th Panzer, for example, you're going to have a hard time in the early game unless you can predictively place your Commando Tank Busters, unless you can predictively place your Sherman DDs and keep them alive, and until at least Phase B to bring in more Shermans. Against infantry-based decks, well, your life's going to be a little bit easier in Phase A. At least until you get over to about Phase C or so, which point all your veterancy does drop on off, assuming, of course, you've been able to keep all of your high vet infantry alive. Regardless, the first SSB is a fascinating new division to kind of be playing here in the second wave DLC, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who enjoys playing airborne divisions in the first place. It gives you a lot of flexibility, gives you a lot of vetted up units, and gives you a very unique playstyle throughout every phase of the game. Now, if you want to leave any comments or thoughts about what my particular deck's seen here, feel free to do so. I'd love to have constructive feedback and have some kind of conversations. If you want to see the SSB in action, well, there are a couple of games over on Twitch right about now. Check out the replay of the sneak peek stream that happened on Tuesday, was it September 19th? And after that, hopefully we try to move these things on over to YouTube so you can at least see the matches between the new divisions. But in any case, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me for this new kind of look into the first SSB Commando Brigade, and I hope to see you guys out in the battlefield. This is Conal Works signing off. Take it easy.